The morning I got arrested in front of my 5-year-old daughter started with pancakes and ended with handcuffs, and I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm not. Yeah, that happened. And the wildest part is it all began because someone thought we didn't look right. We were sitting in our usual booth at Maple Street Diner, the one near the dessert case where the cakes spin slow like they're posing for photos, and Lily was kicking her feet under the table telling me how turning 5 meant she was basically grown now. You know what I mean? That kind of kid logic that makes you smile even when you're tired. I remember thinking how quiet and ordinary it felt, the smell of coffee, the low hum of people talking, sunlight coming through the front windows. And I swear, if life had a pause button, that's the moment I would have pressed it, because 10 minutes later a uniform walked through the door and everything shifted without warning. He didn't look around like most people do when they enter a restaurant, didn't scan for the hostess or glance at the menu board. He locked straight onto us like we were the only thing in the room, and he already knew the ending of the story he thought he'd walked into. And when he reached our table, he didn't greet me, didn't ask politely if he could speak with me. He looked directly at Lily and said, "What's your name, sweetheart?" Like I wasn't even sitting there. I kept my voice calm, steady, the way you do when you sense tension, but you don't want your kid to feel it. And I said, "Officer, you can talk to me. I'm her mother." And he ignored that completely and asked her where she lived, who brought her here, what my name was. Questions that weren't curious questions. They were test questions, like he was waiting for her to mess up so he could catch something. Lily blinked at him, confused but polite, and said, "That's my mom," pointing right at me like it was obvious, and I slid my ID across the table because I've learned in life that sometimes the fastest way to calm a situation is to give people what they think they need before they even ask. But he barely glanced at it and said, "Stand up for me." And that was the exact second I realized this wasn't about concern, it was about control. I said quietly, "I'm not leaving my child, not loud, not rude, just clear." And he straightened up like I'd challenged him in front of an audience, which I guess I had, because by then the tables around us had started to notice the shift forks, slowing conversations, lowering that strange ripple that moves through a room when people feel something is off, even if they don't know why. He told me I was interfering. Imagine being told you're interfering for answering questions about your own child, and I reached into my bag and handed him the adoption papers I carry everywhere. Because paperwork follows adoptive parents, like a shadow school, forms, travel forms, doctor forms, proof after proof that your family is real. And Lily sat there swinging her legs like this was just a weird interruption, not something scary yet, because kids don't panic until they see adults panic. He flipped through the papers like he was skimming a magazine he didn't care about, then pressed his radio and said he had a possible child abduction situation, and I swear you could feel the air change in that diner chairs stilled. Heads turned, phones slowly came out, because those words don't just float, they land hard. They paint a picture whether it's true or not. A waitress stepped closer and said, "Officer, they come here all the time. That's her mom." And another customer nodded, backing her up, and he didn't even look at them. Just told them to step back like they were obstacles instead of witnesses. Backup arrived, younger officer, quieter energy, the kind of presence that actually observes before acting. And he took the papers from my hand and read them for real, checked dates, names, signatures, and I watched his expression change, subtle but clear, like someone realizing they'd walked into the wrong movie scene. And he glanced at his partner like he wanted to say something but didn't, and you could see the moment hanging there, that thin line between speaking up and staying silent, and he chose silence. The first officer didn't slow down, he doubled down, voice firmer, now telling me to step away from the booth, telling me to move to the aisle, giving commands that didn't match the situation, and I said, "Why, there's no problem here." And he answered, "You're being non-compliant." Which is one of those words that sounds official, even when it doesn't mean anything. And I remember thinking how strange it is that calmness can be mistaken for defiance if someone already decided you're a problem. Lily looked at me, her little eyebrows pulled together, and I gave her that reassuring smile parents practice without realizing, the one that says, "Everything's okay, even if you're not sure it is." And then he reached for his cuffs, and the tiny click of metal shifting was louder than all the diner noise combined. And Lily's face changed instantly, confusion turning into fear like a light switching on. She grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Mommy," and something inside me locked into place. Not anger, not panic, just that steady, protective focus that shows up when your kid needs you to be the calmest person in the room. He grabbed my arm, said I was under arrest for obstruction, and people started speaking up, not yelling, just firm voices, saying he was wrong, that they'd seen the papers, that they knew us, and phones were everywhere now. recording from different angles, and Lily started crying, real crying, the kind that shakes their shoulders, tears dropping onto her birthday pancakes. And I stayed calm for her because kids read your face like a weather forecast, and if they see a storm there, they think the world's ending. I told him evenly, "Officer, I'm a magistrate judge, and you'd think that would have been the off-ramp the moment he'd step back and reassess, but pride is a powerful thing when it's already committed to a story." And he just tightened his grip and said I could explain that downtown, like dragging me out of that diner would somehow fix what everyone in the room could already see. Then the door opened and a supervisor walked in, and I'll never forget the way he paused just inside, eyes moving from Lily, crying in the booth, to me in cuffs, to the half circle of people filming, and he didn't puff up or bark orders, he just asked calm as anything, "What's the call?" And the officer said, "Possible abduction." And the supervisor asked what evidence, and the answer was non-compliance. And that silence that followed said more than any argument could. The supervisor asked my name, stepped aside, checked his phone for maybe 10 seconds, came back and said, "Remove the cuffs." Simple as that, like correcting a typo. And when the officer hesitated, he repeated it, same tone. "That's an order," and the cuffs came off. I went straight to Lily, held her, told her she was okay, and she clung to me like she'd been holding her breath the whole time, while behind us the supervisor quietly started gathering statements, asking staff what they saw, asking the second officer what he'd reviewed. And you could feel the shift in the room that moment when everyone realizes reality just snapped back into place. By afternoon, the videos were online. By evening, they were everywhere, and you didn't need commentary because the footage spoke plain English. Vague complaint, instant suspicion, escalation with no evidence, arrest attempt in front of a child. Internal Affairs opened an investigation, pulled body cam footage, radio logs, reports, witness statements, and here's where it really unraveled. His written report claimed I'd refused cooperation, claimed he had reasonable suspicion, claimed things that simply didn't match what 20 cameras showed. And once investigators started looking deeper, they found other complaints, other stops, same pattern, different families. He was suspended, then terminated, not just for bad judgment, but for policy violations and false statements. And that distinction matters because mistakes can be explained, dishonesty can't. I filed a federal civil rights lawsuit, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted a record. A line in the sand that said, this happened and it was wrong. And when discovery started looming with depositions and training records and prior complaints, the city settled for $2 million. People hear that number and think jackpot, but it didn't feel like winning anything. It felt like paperwork after a storm, like rebuilding something that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. And most of that money went straight into Lily's future, her education, her therapy, her sense of safety, because trauma doesn't disappear just because someone says sorry. The department announced new policies after that, stricter rules about vague calls, more oversight on certain radio codes, retraining on what reasonable suspicion actually means, changes they probably should have made long before I ever sat down for pancakes that morning. About a year later, Lily asked if we could go back to that diner, same booth, same spinning cakes, and I'll admit I hesitated because places remember things even when they look the same, but we went, we sat, we ordered pancakes, and I watched her shoulders relax little by little until she was swinging her legs again, like nothing had ever happened. And that's when I realized justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just getting your normal life back. But I still think about that morning, about how different it could have ended if nobody had spoken up, if nobody had recorded, if that supervisor had shown up 5 minutes later. And I keep wondering what most people would really do in that situation. Not what we like to believe we'd do, but what we actually would. So I want you to tell me honestly, if you'd been sitting in that diner watching it unfold, would you have stepped in? Would you have filmed, or would you have kept eating and hoped it wasn't your problem? And don't just say what sounds right, say what's real, because these moments happen every day. And the difference between injustice and accountability is usually whoever's willing to speak first. So drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me what you think was right, what was wrong, and whether you've ever witnessed something like this yourself.